Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special edition, special crossover episode of the Cast Beyond the Wall, the House of the Dragons podcast, and the Cinematic Schematic from thecinematropolis.com. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and to my lords and the ladies of the realm, Cast Beyond the Wall is normally your guide to all things Westerosi. I know, and this seems very far from Westeros. For the Cinematic Schematic listeners, I know that you're used to hearing us bring you thoughtful conversations on film. But today we're shaking things up by stepping away from both of those things, both dragons and the big screen, and we're going to talk about the fungal post-apocalypse. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at HBO's The Last of Us. Why? Because I have two different podcasts. Neither of them technically fit The Last of Us, but I do what I want. And literally everyone's like, are you going to do a Last of Us podcast? And I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, it's going to happen.
He likes chaos.
Chaos is a ladder, as Littlefinger once said in Game of Thrones. In today's bonus crossover episode, I'll be speaking with a panel of guests to provide our reviews and analysis of The Last of Us Season 1, which for those of you who have been paying attention, have not been paying attention, just wrapped up its first season on Sunday, March 12th. Went up against the Oscars. We're going to start by sharing a little bit about our experience with zombie fiction, just get a flavor of what does the panel think about zombie stories in general, and then we'll also talk about our experience that each of us have with The Last of Us video games, and then we'll provide our reviews of Season 1. And finally, we'll be going deeper into some of the series' themes before closing out the conversation by speculating in a spoiler-free way about what we think might happen next. Again, just to underscore that disclaimer, we're going to be spoiling everything that happens in Season 1 of HBO's The Last of Us television show. However, we will not be spoiling anything outside of what has aired on HBO, including The Last of Us Part 2, or even some of the comics that are related to the franchise. We're not talking about any of those. This is specifically on Season 1 of the television show. We may talk about some things from The Last of Us Part 1, the original video game, that were not in the show, but we're not leaving those parameters. So fear not, we're not going to divulge what happens next. Now for me, let's hear from today's really exciting panel. I'm so excited. I think this is the biggest panel I've had on either podcast in quite some time. So I'm going to shake things up a little bit. Today, I'm going to allow each of our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with the man to my left, sir.
So my name is Laron Chapman. I do podcasts, screenwriting, filmmaking, and occasional exotic dancing. Just kidding. And I've not played The Last of Us video games.
All right. Thank you, LeBron. So excited to have you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Next up.
Hi, I am Jo Light. I'm a features editor with Static Media, which is an online media company. They own a lot of websites, including Slash Film. I'm also a writer. And I have played The Last of Us Parts 1 and 2 obsessively more than 3 times each. And yeah, I'm in love with this universe.
Awesome. Next up, sir.
Hi, my name's Harold Story. I run Tunes. That's a podcast and website dedicated to music, anime, animation, cartoons in general. And I have not played the video games. So I'm very excited to talk about the show, though. I really did love this series so far.
Excellent. So keeping score of the listeners, that is 2 people who have played the games and 2 people have not. So we have to break the tie one way or another by introducing our last guest, sir.
Hi, my name is Daniel Stoll. I am a co-host with Caleb on Cast Beyond the Wall, and I'm not as cool as a lot of these other people. That's my only contribution to the any sort of film or anything like that. I mean, I guess I have a Letterboxd account. Maybe that counts for something. But
yeah.
There you go.
I have played both of The Last of Us video games. I'm a huge fan. I absolutely love them. So I am very excited to talk about the show.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So for those of you who have never tuned into either show before, so these are 2 of my podcasts kind of put together. Now, before we get into today's review conversation related to The Last of Us Part 1, I wanted to note that if you're listening to the show and you enjoy the conversation, please support us by subscribing and leaving us a rating and a review on your preferred podcast app. Doesn't really matter which feed you're on. If you are listening to the Cast Beyond the Wall, if you haven't listened to the Cinematic Schematic, head over to that feed and subscribe to that as well, because these are 2 different shows. Cast Beyond the Wall, more about television, Cinematic Schematic, more about movies. Regardless, subscribe to each feed and leave us that rating and review. So let's get into today's conversation here. And before we really talk about The Last of Us, I think it's only fair that our listeners learn a little bit more about what each of us brings to zombie fiction. or zombie stories. There's so much of it. So I'll start with you, Laron. What is your level of interest or expertise in zombie fiction?
I like zombies quite a bit. I feel like they've always kind of been a commentary on our fear of disease in our country, and I think that that's also the type of zombie story that's always resonated with me the most. The ones that lean a little bit more towards the realism of it. With films such as like 28 Days and 28 Weeks Later, those are my favorite kinds of zombies because they kind of imagine a world that doesn't seem that far away from something that can happen in our own lives. And so I think the more it leans towards something that I can feel is tangible, like a tangible threat, tangible existential threat, kind of is what stands out to me the most. So.
All right, so tangible threats.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like a good zombie comedy too, but for totally different reasons though.
So where do you stand in the fast zombies versus slow zombies debate of like 20 years ago?
See, like fast zombies in real life for my comedy, like lighthearted, then it's funnier to see the slow ones like your Shaun of the Deads or something like that, where it's less about the zombies. There's a lot more going on. So,
okay, all right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Joe Light, give us your zombie takes, all of them.
Oh boy, I love zombie movies. One of the first screenplays I ever wrote on my own was a zombie comedy, so I love them. I agree with Laurent in that they can be used. Well, horror in general obviously can be used as like social commentary and looking at things that are going on in the world. So I love that zombies are an extension of that. So my recurring nightmares are usually like zombie related. Those are the only nightmares I have that usually scare me the most, where I'm like having to strategize and think of how I'm going to get out of some place. So they're very effective as actual horror too, I think. I tend to go for, I don't know. I love Shaun of the Dead. I love Return of the Living Dead. I think those are two of my favorite horror movies of all time. So I might go more toward comedy, but I don't know. I love all zombies. I think it's safe to say.
All zombies. So zombies, fast, slow, any variety you can get.
Yeah.
I think
they're all our children.
they are.
Any flavor.
I mean, there's so many different ways to utilize zombies, to your point. Daniel Stoll, tell us, what are your thoughts on zombies?
As a self-proclaimed nerd, you would think that I would be like super into zombies because I feel like that's like part of nerd culture, but I'm actually pretty like mediocre on zombies. I mean, I love, like, kind of like Laurent said, like 28 Days Later, but like my favorite zombie movie probably being like Train to Busan.
That's a good one.
I really love that one. And even if I played like tons of video games like Left 4 Dead, Back 4 Blood, zombie games that I love. And horror being my favorite genre, you would think that I'd be all about zombies, but it's probably, as the subgenre of horror, it's not up there as one of my favorite lists. So I come in pretty mediocre on zombies. Like if it's done well, I can really enjoy it. But I do think sometimes like there can be a lot of similarities between certain zombie stories. Like it's very bleak and you have to deal with some of the same sort of themes and concepts, and it can, if not handled well, it can feel repetitive. So that would be my take on zombies.
So you're kind of like down the middle. You're like, they're all right, but you don't keep up with them as much. Although Train to Busan, that's a good one that I feel like has only really started to get its day over the last like 2 or 3 years. So great call out there. Harold Story, tell us about your relationship with the zombies.
Yeah, sure. I love horror of any kind. That's my favorite type of movie to watch. And I love 28 Days, 28 Weeks Later, two of my favorite in that series. I actually did just rewatch the 2004 Dawn of the Dead. I think that's a very fun movie.
It's probably Zack Snyder's best movie.
Yeah, it's pretty. And then the ending, you're just like so bummed. You're like, dang it! Like everything went to shit in the end. But yeah, I mean, I just really love. I love the genre. I don't get like, it's not like my end all be all favorite horror, but just for me personally, like I've never been super into like the supernatural type stuff. Like I'll watch those movies and like they're entertaining to me, but the zombie stuff is always seemed like a semi-tangible to me, like a virus breaking out. Like that could probably happen, and maybe it did happen a couple years ago, maybe, but we didn't turn into zombies, thankfully. But
But it was very surreal when The Last of Us Part 2 came out in June of 2020. When you're like, hey, a game about a zombie outbreak.
And that's I know we've talked about it. I don't want to get too far off on that, but I remember getting lunch with Caleb one day in February of 2020 and being like, wow, this coronavirus thing in Europe is crazy, isn't it? And then, man, we did not know they were about to come off the top rope for us.
Yeah,
But
wild ride.
But yeah, man, I think that's why I've always liked it. It's just it's always been, not insanely far fetched like a demon or something. To me, that just me personally, I'm like, eh. But like a zombie thing, I'm like, that could maybe happen. I don't know. Especially this whole the show is my experience with Last of Us, and like the way that they approach it, I'm like, wow, like this is actually like, is this real? Like, could this actually happen? Like, so I like that approach, and it's very interesting to me.
Well, and even though the COVID-19 pandemic was not, it wasn't a air quotes zombie outbreak. There is a lot of similarities though, especially early pandemic before we'd kind of figured out how to safely interact with each other. It's like,
right.
It's like, you're a zombie. If I don't know you, you're not my I mean, I'm not trying to, it's not a laughing matter. I just,
no, you're right.
Or in our approach to it, like how we, the fearfulness we
stay
had
away from me
initially, like, hey, okay, you hear someone cough and you're like, oh no, like you're afraid of contracting whatever,
Yeah, for real though.
Yeah. So, I mean, our reaction to it is very similar. I mean, if we're not going into the more like, I mean, we weren't salivating and
right, right. Everybody was washing their groceries in the sink.
Yeah, I was Lysol in my cereal. So.
I was using Clorox instead of milk in my cereal.
Like, why not? It's just like,
Clorox, you had to wash the cereal off.
Yeah,
but I mean, it is kind of like some moments in the show where it's like, oh, you're infected, or are you infected?
Right?
You have that similar like, you don't know if
true.
you can trust someone. And
right.
It's like, not that I don't want to help or care, but it's just like you gotta take care of yourself so you don't infect the people in your life, right?
Exactly.
Just like environments too. Like I lived by a school at the time, and when I would walk my dog and look in the school, I could see like it had just been left, like the way that they had left that day, and I could see how easily, just like in the show, like you could see the environments as they were when the outbreak happened. So that was my frame of reference also, for just being a fan of the games and seeing that, and then seeing it reflected in real life was very eerie to me.
Yeah, definitely. So Harold, I think you're spot on. Again, you're not salivating at the mouth, and we're not, turning into zombies per se, but there's a lot of similarities in what we experience in the real world that I still think we're unpacking collectively as a society. But okay. So, I mean, like when it comes to zombies, I loved zombies growing up. And then I gotta say I would call it the zombie boom of the late 2000s, early 2010s. So, that's when Walking Dead showed up. That's when we got like every video game has some sort of zombie horde mode. I mean, there was just Left 4 Dead was one of my favorite games. I mean, there was just zombies. You couldn't escape them, just like zombies. In pop culture, it was like everyone was trying to do a zombie thing, and it definitely burned me out and fatigued me for a while, to where I think I was just less interested for a while. But I really love how the zombie stories enables us to explore both the fragility of the systems that we have within our society, which is, I mean, again, speaking in 2023, hits a little differently, even because we've seen how those systems were actually put to the test, with COVID-19. But I also like how you can simultaneously look at the systems and sort of maybe from a more sociological perspective, the impact of zombies would have on the day-to-day, and how people would, sort of like build their own families or build their own villages. But I also really like how you're able to simultaneously explore the native, the human nature at the root of it. So what does fear do to people? How does the power dynamic, where does power come from when all the systems that have previously existed are shattered? What does that look like? So I think there's a ton of great stories that come from zombie fiction still today. And I'm happy to say, still love me some zombies after taking a very long break for probably about 6 or 7 years. Dawn of the Dead, both of them I think are excellent. They're two of my favorites. So that's the original George Romero film from the 80s. I think it was a really fascinating look at the kind of consumerism that we saw exploding in the 80s. That's honestly rampant. Can't even, it seems funny that we would talk about commercialism or consumerism as a problem today, because it's just like that's just a part of the world we live in. But in the 80s, that was definitely a big topic I think Romero was interested in. I think it's still fascinating. And then the remake is doing so in a sexier, more fast-paced kind of way. But I actually really like the group dynamic in Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. It's got just the right amount of humor. It's got some like commentary. The zombies are terrifying in that movie.
I think it's got a great cast too.
Sarah Polley.
Underrated.
Sarah Polley.
Sarah Polley's in there. Ving Rhames.
Mackay Pfeiffer.
Yep.
Shout out to Mackay.
Hey.
I still think one of my favorite bits in all of zombie fiction is when they're sniping the celebrity lookalikes from the mall.
Wasn't one of them Rosie O'Donnell?
Yeah, Rosie O'Donnell and Jay Leno.
Yeah.
Yep. I
And they're
remember
playing
those.
with there was the dude with the gun shop across the parking lot with the sign.
Yeah.
That's still one of my favorite moments in all zombie fiction. A couple others I want to shout out. Daniel Traina Bassan, I think, is a really great recent reimagining. You kind of combine the things I like about movies like Snowpiercer with zombies. Sort of paralleling like the upper class versus the lower class and how they have to work together to overcome a zombie apocalypse. And then of course you have to even if you don't love it, you really have to give credit to George Romero's original Night of the Living Dead, which popularized zombies, and I think is the reason we can think about zombie fiction through a more critical lens, just the way it kind of portrays race in the zombie apocalypse. So anyway, lots of great zombie movies out there, but let's turn it to the games. So the Last of Us franchise. Joe, as a person who has played it, you've probably played the games more than anyone at this table. Because I don't
know. I am obsessed. So I'm not trying to like win anything, but I'm very obsessed.
You know what's impressive though? I can only manage to do part 2 1.5 times. So I'd love to get your take here. I mean, what do you think sets The Last of Us video games apart from some others, especially zombie video games that we've gotten in the past?
Oh, I think the most obvious one is just the thoughtfulness to story. I'm actually watching someone play Resident Evil 4, the remake that just came out right now, and it's great. And it's really fun, and I like all the Resident Evil games, but they're very, very spare on like who the person is that you're actually playing as and what relationships are. It's very, very sparse. So a story like The Last of Us, which starts in that gorgeous cinematic and sets up relationships and stories before you do anything else. I think for me, it was the first experience with the game that actually felt like more like a film. At the time, that was like revolutionary. Not so much probably anymore, but I think that's what made it Game of the Year at the time. They pushed so much in terms of, not to jump too far ahead, but like conversations about morality and ethics and what that decision means in the context of these different relationships. So yeah, I think that the story is just so thoughtful and so well developed, and the characters are so rich and their relationships are so rich. It's just more involved, I think. Even though you're being guided down a certain path, like you feel more involved in the story from the very beginning, I would say.
It's definitely like a really deeply intimate connection you have with the characters that we'll get into here in a little bit. Daniel, you've also played the games. What's your take on what sets the Last of Us video games apart?
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree with all of that. I think it's very popular in video games right now, I feel like, to have open world sort of story where you get an impact on the story, and like your decisions in the game like change what happens. And I love games like that, don't get me wrong, but that is not The Last of Us. You are not playing a character that you get to kind of create. You're playing Joel, you get to experience what Joel experiences, and that's just a little bit different than what a lot of other video games will do. But I think that works in its favor, and I think that that it's such. Like you were saying, it's almost like you're watching a film, and there are parts of it that you get to interact with like on a personal level, but you're almost just watching a movie is how it feels like. And for me, it's like the relationships of the characters and how deep they are feels way more deep than like your average video game. Like Ellie is probably one of my favorite characters, like in all the video games. And she just stands so much higher than like any other character because I feel like I know her character so well. Whereas in other stories, like it is cool as the player when you get to like have an impact on the, on the character or whatever, but this is just not that story. But I think that's why it stands apart. So I also think one of the things about the video games, and for a lot of video games, violence is very common in video games. But with The Last of Us in the video game, I remember feeling uncomfortable like performing the violence, which is not true in a lot of video games. A lot of times it's just there are NPCs, you kill them. It's even like fun to go through, and you're supposed to be enjoying the killing of other characters, but it didn't feel like that. In The Last of Us, like you get to know, even though they are NPCs, like you hear characters like talking about each other like in the background, and you're like, oh, I just like killed that guy's friend, and like they're reacting to his death now, and like there's stuff like that I think really make it feel a lot more impactful than your average video game.
Yeah, I think in contrast to what Joe was saying, and Resident Evil sort of was the biggest zombie franchise before we had The Last of Us, and I actually am also playing that Resident Evil 4 remake
Nice.
right
It's
now.
beautiful.
It's so beautiful and nostalgic. It was certainly not interested in like diving into the impacts of zombies on society as much as it was really going for the thrills and the intense fear. I think, not a ton more to add to what the two of you have already said. I do really like that the objective of The Last of Us really is not kill as many zombies as possible. I'm thinking about other popular, zombie video games, mostly like Dead Rising, Left 4 Dead, the Call of Duty zombie game, also the arcade series House of the Dead that was really popular before we got The Last of Us, kind of in that time period in the zeitgeist, where it's like, yeah, your goal is just to mow down as many zombies in the most creative ways you can come up with. In this story, you are focused on avoid the zombies as much as possible, actually. In fact, if you can avoid an encounter, you should, because you need to save the ammo, because you might run out of bullets. Clickers are super dangerous. You want to hide from them, protect what is yours, survive. And I know there was a whole genre, survival horror. This technically falls in that category. Was around before The Last of Us, but very few of them I feel like effectively hit on the survive, protect, fall in love with the characters. And the other thing I just want to add one more note onto what both of you have said about the characters and how well written they are and how intimately connected you feel like you get with them. The thing that I think those games do really, really well, we actually can give credit to the studio Naughty Dog. They actually did this very effectively in the Uncharted series, which is it utilizes video games in a way that I don't think even television can do. You learn a lot about these characters when you're playing through the game. When you're doing like acts, you're crawling along a wall and Joel will make a joke, or Ellie cracks a joke, or someone will get on a backstory while you're like trying to problem solve or troubleshoot. And it's something that's really unique to video games because, and again, we'll get into it, but they do find some really clever ways to integrate that into the television show. It's kind of like when you're fixing a car with your dad or you're doing something with someone else, and you're just having a conversation while you're doing the thing. It kind of develops this really like intimate, personable bond that I don't think is possible to get in film or television because it's more of there's a more passive media where this is more active. Anyway, that's one thing I think Naughty Dog as a studio has done extremely well, and it was deployed very, very effectively in The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2. So Harold and Laurent, though, and Laurent, I'll start with you. What had you heard about the video games?
For every one of my friends that has played this game, I'm telling you that I think every single one of them has virtually said this was their favorite game. And so it's always been something that I've been vaguely aware of, at least, is the popularity of it, at least the phenomenon of it. But I think that to kind of Joe's point, and yours as well, it seems like what separates this game from other games of its kind is that there's kind of a humanity to it. There's a human story being told, and that definitely translates in the adaptation of the show, which we'll talk about more later. But I think that what I'm aware of with this is that with cinema, when you're watching, something, it's very much like it's more of a passive, like soak it up and just kind of let the filmmakers guide you through this process. And with video games, traditionally, it's more of an interactive, a more expansive, complex experience where you have to, your decisions, navigate, what you're going to see next. And every player is going to have a different experience, slightly different experience with it based on whatever choices they make, in it. But what seems to be different with The Last of Us, as you were saying, is that they emphasize these characters in this world and everything initially before, so that you are involved in that process. And as you mentioned, it's a lot more intimate because you get to know these characters a lot more with the more time you're spending with them, and then all the choices that you make actually have an effect on you. And these, like you said, these NPCs people don't just become things that you mull down, that you would in kind of an aimless wandering game. So it's definitely someone here cares about story and character. So that's a huge plus.
All right. Harold?
Yeah, I had I knew about it. We have a mutual friend, Jacob Galatia. He's a huge gamer, and we met. He'd been playing it, and I've never been a huge gamer myself. I play some of the classic stuff, but never. I don't have like the newest stuff. Like I'm not like, oh, this game's getting ready to come out, I gotta get it. But he had mentioned that game, and he was like, I know you're not a big gamer, but like just like the story in this, like if you have like 10 minutes or whatever to watch this, they have like the cinematic on YouTube of the first like little bit of the first game, and I watched it and I was like, dang, it was like I really wanted to like just go buy a PlayStation, buy that game just to play it, like just from watching that, just because it was like it made me very emotional to see what happens with Joel and Sarah, like in the beginning, and you're like, wow, and it's just unlike, I think you guys have all kind of said it in a way, but I was like, wow, I've never seen like a video game kind of do something like that where it was like such a focus on the story.
Yeah.
And so that was my experience with it, is that just hearing about it, and everyone that I knew that, you kind of have your friends that you're like, they don't miss, like they know what I like and they suggest something and it's good. And Jacob's kind of like that for me. So I was like, okay, like I need to, if I ever get a game or whatever, if I ever get a PlayStation, I should check that game out. So when I heard that they were doing a show, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to watch this, obviously, just from that one little clip that I watched. And then in a lot of ways, I think it was, I don't know, I'm interested to talk about that when we start doing our proper discussion, just to see the difference between our perceptions of like the show and like what they did and didn't include. And I don't know anything. So like everything I'm getting is a new.
Same.
And so it's just, I don't have that, well, they didn't include this one specific part of this one specific mission, so this entire episode's garbage. Like, there's always people that are like that. One thing I did see, just as, to wrap up kind of that intro to this, was someone had put, like it's a pretty good adaptation, but in this part, Ellie didn't die 10 times like I did when I was playing, so it just wasn't really true to the game. So yeah, I thought that was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, Joel didn't get mutilated by the zombie like 18 times in the first 10 minutes. So this game,
that sniper was way worse in the show than it was in the game.
Just one quick thing too is just I do like having friends that have played it, because then I could talk to. It's like the conversation is fun.
Yeah,
because I'm like, oh, this one, and then they can fill me in on something like maybe that wasn't included, or some cool Easter egg of like one thing that Jacob told me was like, the guy that played Joel was in the game, was in the show, and like in the scene you could see him. I'm like, that's crazy. Like that's so cool.
It was a really intentional and thoughtful choice by Craig Mazin to push to have and Neil Druckmann to include all of the main actors and performers from the first game in this series. It's pretty neat, especially the Ashley Johnson one was a big one. Well, just on that note of video game adaptations, it sounds like we all kind of brought varying levels of experience to this, and think Joe, you and Daniel have hit on this. Like, there's not exactly been a plethora of great video game adaptations. Hollywood has been pushing, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, really hard to try to figure it out. I feel like we're getting pretty close. We'll dive into that more in a bit. But I'm just curious, like, why is it that we think that video game adaptations have generally struggled to make the successful transition to film and television? I'll start with you, Lauren.
I think because they're two very different mediums, like I think again, film again being a much more passive, just soak it up and watch it. And then this being like, you have to make the choices and decisions, and the POV that you have is going to be different, than the one that's being given to you, when you watch a film. But I think the biggest thing for me with everything that I've seen, because it's probably nuance is a good thing. Like that's something that lends itself to the more, the more cinematic. Whereas a game can be flamboyant, can be, flashy, and maybe not as cohesive if it doesn't have to be. Whereas a film, it's when you're just sitting there watching it, you can pick things apart a lot easier than when you're playing around with it. because you can kind of figure things out with a game. You know what I mean? You just go here until it advances to the next phase. Whereas with a show, you're just like, this isn't clicking for me. This isn't working for me. So I think, I would say nuanced characterization. Like if you're not really invested in the character that you're playing, or the characters you're seeing, then that there can be a disconnect there. So I think probably translating these two different mediums is hard because everyone kind of has a different relationship with that game, than maybe like a source material with a book, Like some things are a little bit more cut and dry there, where with the game, it's a little bit, again, more interactive and people come at it from different avenues. So,
Yeah, especially with like the open world type of video games where you can literally
choose your own adventure type of things. Like we talked about The Quarry not too long ago. Like that's an example where it's like, you could have 14 different endings depending on which decision you make, so... and in some ways, that's kind of like what that translation is probably the conflict of that. I could see that being an issue and adapting this body of work to make it a more leisure, experience to just kind of watch and enjoy. But
Joe, you play a lot of games, and you also you play enough. Some games, but you've played a lot of games, and you're doing a lot of writing about film and television like all the time. Like from your perspective, what do you think's been the real core challenge there? Is it sort of the interactivity? Or has it been that video game writing is just generally not very good? Has it just been Hollywood not understanding? Like what is it? What are your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of what Laurent was saying. Craig Mazin didn't write all the adaptations in the world, so that's probably a big
that helped.
point against all of them because he's just a genius. He's one of my favorite writers of all time. Games are so like mission based. They're very episodic. They're fun, but I think someone else said repetitive sometimes. So if you're just doing like, all right, run into this spot and kill those enemies and then run to another spot and kill those enemies and do this. And sometimes it's connected and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you get character work, sometimes you don't. It doesn't, if you don't have someone doing the work like Craig Mazin with characters and making sure that everyone's in really specific conflict and has backstories and we can understand everyone to some degree, it's just not going to work, I don't think. I thought about this question for a long time, actually, just thinking of like bad adaptations, and there are plenty, like
so many.
Tomb Raider. I think that they just they focus so much on like I don't know. It's just they're not thoughtful. There's plenty of, I think, material there in a lot of games to maybe do something with it, but if you don't go beyond like that's a hot girl in a tank top and shorts, like there's not going to be really anything for an audience to enjoy. So yeah, I if you don't start with a game that has that foundation, it's not going to come over into anything.
When I think the thing about Craig Mazin that's really important too is he's actually played the game and I think has a certain level of respect for the material, but also has the instincts to know when to push it or when to tweak it, versus it seems to me like a lot of times when they are making a video game adaptation, either it's totally driven by studio and they just don't care. They're like, popular IP, put it out. And the director's like, I played that Mario game when I was like 5. It's great. And then they don't really take the time to really sit and consider, okay, but like, what does that look like in a story? I think you need a good balance of, hey, this is great source material, but you also have a showrunner who knows how to separate what works about the story from what works about the game, and how can we make those dots connect when we're actually, mapping the plot and mapping the characters.
Well, even what you said about that sniper in the game, I don't even remember what the sniper in the game looks like, or he's just like some guy. But then in the show, it's this very old man, and you could see like the conflict in both of the characters in that scene where Joel is like, don't do it, I'm going to have to kill you. Like, that's such an amazing moment that I think is totally Craig Mazin. Like, I think that's all him bringing that to that scene. And it's less than a minute, and it's just so powerful.
Well, and I think that we'll get into it, but the entire in the show, it's Kansas City. In the video games, it's Pittsburgh. It's I remember, and having just played part 1 over the fall when it got released on PlayStation 5, I remember thinking they don't ever really explain why these people were just like dead set on capturing you, other than that obviously I think they're looking for food. The show does a really good job at reframing it and drives, there's people who are personally invested and trying to capture, Ellie and Joel in that scenario. So again, just kind of like stepping back and saying, okay, what's missing? How can we refigure that? That's a good point. Harold, I mean, you have any thoughts on adapting, video games to television or film?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to, someone that talks to people about anime a lot. That is a big talking point too. Adapting anime to shows, adapting anime to movies, Cowboy Bebop being one of the big ones. Recently that was pretty dunked on. But
it was very bad.
I think
I love so many people that were involved in that show too, by the way. So
it's funny because like on paper you're like, this is going to be a knockout, and then it doesn't quite land, and you can't figure out why. And I do think a lot of it is that to everyone it's a little bit different. Like the idea of staying true to the source material, that's different to everybody. I feel like, because even if. And it's the subjectivity of it, I think, is what makes it such a hard target to hit. Is that in these shows, like say they had done this show and it was frame for frame from the video game. Well, there'd still be people that are like, well, they didn't even do anything different. It was just a video game.
Yeah.
But and then they leave out a moment, and like we're talking about earlier, people are like, well, it would have been great, but they left out this one little part, and that would have made it way better. And it's like, man, like you can't.
What is faithfulness?
Yeah, it's like what it can't be expected to include.
Joel didn't wear that jacket in that one scene.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Like adaptation.
And I understand he there's something with him playing the guitar at some point, and I think he talks about that in the show, but never does it. So that was another thing that I think people mentioned too. So there's just like all these little things. I think, and I don't think it's just video games. Lauren, you mentioned books. Books are a huge one where people are like, oh, the book was way better than the movie. Like you hear that all the time. You don't even think about it
because you have this long relationship with a book. That's like, you know what I mean. Like you live in a chapter for a long time. Where in a scene is like a scene could be 2 minutes.
So much of the visual it takes away from what is laid out in the copy. Yeah. So it is going to be different in a lot of ways. But I think I like Joe said, I was thinking about this a lot too. It was like, why is this? And I think that is probably a big part of it. Staying true to the source material is different for everybody. Like what, doing that well, what doing that is well.
And you need someone who has, I think Joe hit the nail on the head. It's having a showrunner like Craig Mazin, who, I mean, again, it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to please everyone, but I think his storytelling instincts is whenever you're kind of like deconstructing the story of the video game, having the instincts to know what's the stuff that you leave in, or that you bring in, and what's the new angle, right?
And being a fan of it too, like
right.
If he wasn't, if you had someone adapt it that say didn't play the game or didn't, you know what I mean, or didn't have any passion behind it, that could also because someone can do like a very clinical adaptation of it, but then it wouldn't have the same kind of emotional impact that I think that it's had on a lot of people too. So.
One thing I wanted to mention, sorry, Lauren, that was that I meant to mention when I was talking about something being faithful, and it really touches on what you said. Henry Cavill at The Witcher, he was a huge fan of The Witcher.
Right.
Yeah.
He read the books even. And that show was pretty well received. People like that show in general.
Specifically his portrayal of Geralt. Yeah.
So it's nice to have a buff nerd out here doing doing cool stuff
for now. Final season
while
of The
we
Witcher
can.
Well,
yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's really hard to pick like which hills to die on. Daniel, do you have any thoughts on what makes a good adaptation for video games?
Yeah, I mean, I think
video games to television. Sorry.
No, I think everybody has really done a good job of covering it. I think video games and even like we were talking about with books, like it's such a personal experience that you have with it. Like even when you're playing, right? Like I don't say like if I'm like I have a friend that I'm talking about, like yeah, and then Joel went and did this. I say like no, I went and did that. Like there's like just this personal connection you have that if the person adapting it, like you guys are saying, doesn't understand that, like it doesn't land in the same way, and it's hard to adapt that, and especially if the game itself is not like pretty heavily narrative based already to begin with. I think, like you were saying, Caleb, I think you have to have the right person who is really passionate and really understands the characters or the story of what you're adapting to be able to do it justice. And that just doesn't, especially when it comes to games, like games can get a bad rap sometimes. Like either like, I remember like even at like I happen to work at a high school. Like there's even some people in my high school, sorry for this tangent, but like we'll say things like that video game violence is causing like bad things to like causing people to do violence, right? Like there is this like narrative that like video games aren't able to have sort of an elevated story. So when people come to adapt it, they don't understand. Some people don't have that level of understanding that there is something really beautiful here.
When I would say Hollywood just in general this is a separate podcast. I want to keep us moving, but I will say there is a really weird relationship between Hollywood and the video game industry in that Hollywood until semi-recently has the general consensus that when you hear filmmakers talking about video game adaptations, I would say up until like maybe 5 years ago, has generally been like, yeah, the video game story is, pretty simple, pretty basic, or not great, and we're trying to make it better. Video games have historically, and you can see this at things like even like the Video Game Awards, which I'm a big fan of, there's this constant sense of video games feeling like they need to prove that they're ready for the grown-ups table, even though I think they long ago proved that they're more than worthy to be at the air quotes grown-ups table for storytelling. So there's this really weird thing where Hollywood has historically, from my perspective, looked down upon video games as viable stories, and video games being like, no. We can be mature grown-up stories too, right? And it's like honestly up until pretty recently. On that note, though, I just want to give a quick shout out and give you guys a chance to throw out a few names if you want. But Harold, you already said The Witcher. I think there have been some really good adaptations out there. Not technically a video game, but basically a video game, and there's a video game of it. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World in 2010 captures a lot about what makes a video game in the form of film. I think Arcane on Netflix is an outstanding series, and I don't even play League of Legends, and I thought that was just an incredible story with some of the most innovative animation I've seen in my life. Silent Hill from 2006, not an all-around great movie, but man, it nails
That's
atmosphere.
some good moments.
The atmosphere,
The atmosphere it nails it, even if the script's a little wonky. The recent Castlevania anime on Netflix is really strong. Detective Pikachu, I also think is solid. It's like kind of identifying the things that people really go to Pokemon for, which is the really weird kind of world and that kind of intimate connection with the creatures and seeing the Pokemon be silly. These are stories that I think are doing a good job identifying what draws people to those games and finding really unique ways to put them on the screen. Also, not going to die on this hill, but I have to say I will argue in favor of 2005's masterpiece Doom, starring The Rock.
I was literally thinking that. That's funny. That whole end sequence is first person.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That movie is hokey. It's terrible. But it's got two actors I really like who clearly know what kind of movie they're in, and a movie that's trying. It's very silly. It's not good, but I love it.
I actually forgot that happened.
Probably
your brain will block out trauma for you. So.
Okay, so really quickly here, because I want to make sure we shift to the review really quick, though. But Daniel, I'll start for you. What excited you most about this specific adaptation for HBO?
I think for me, I sort of said this, I think, but it's probably one of my favorite stories in video games that I've ever played. It's just such an experience playing it, and I will just love it forever. So I was excited to see that something that I love so much be brought to maybe some people will get to experience this that wouldn't have ever experienced it because they don't play video games or for whatever reason. So the fact that other people get to experience what I believe is like one of the most beautiful stories I've ever participated in, I was excited that other people are going to get to see this who wouldn't normally get to see it. So that's what I was excited for. I honestly was, at first I was a little concerned because, like I said, like Ellie is like one of my favorite characters. And so I was like, it's like one of those things, kind of like what Harold was saying a second ago, like they better not mess up my the characters, right? Like, but as soon as I heard that Neil Druckmann was going to be involved and Craig Mazin, I was like, okay, and it's HBO, and HBO generally has a pretty good track record. I was like, okay, like most of my concerns went away. Like I was like pretty optimistic with maybe a little bit of caution. Like, are they going to really sell these characters that I love? And like, they did a wonderful job. So, but yeah, going in, most of my concerns were kind of squelched by hearing who was running it and that it was coming on in HBO. So
Yeah. Again, for listeners who are not familiar with Craig Mazin, we've been singing his praises. He's done a lot of things. I think the thing that really pivoted him into the spotlight as a critical success was the HBO miniseries Chernobyl that came out in 2019.
It's so good.
It's so good.
It's incredible.
Stressful. It's funny for it to be a historical thing, and you know what's going to happen, and you still have this sense of dread the entire time.
That's why it's so
good.
So
Yes.
good. And the way it felt yes, this is a historical drama about bad things that happen, but when it came out, you're like, this is so relevant to the time 2019. Like, this is such a story that we need to hear right now. Good stuff. Joe, how about you? What would you say, what were you most excited to see, and what was your biggest concern?
I don't think I had any concerns similar to what you were saying. Just as soon as I heard that both Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann were involved, I knew that it was going to be good, basically. Most excited about? I don't know. It's just, it's been my favorite game since it came out. So I think I'm just going to echo a lot of what you said, which is just seeing it again, seeing it realized in even a more cinematic way, seeing it with these actors, having more people come on and be excited about it. TikTok has been great as the show is coming off. So many edits, so many Pedro Pascal new fans. As we all know, he's everywhere. It's just been really fun. So I've just really enjoyed that. I know we can't talk about it, but I'll just say, I think I'm a little, not worried, but I'm very curious to see how they're going to do game 2. I think it's going to be more challenging. It's not so much 1-to-1. So I don't necessarily have so much concerns as just
Curiosity.
What's going to happen?
Yep. Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at with part 2 adaptation as well. I'm like, I'm not worried because you guys have proven that you know what you're doing, and yeah, you've got all the right, as you have said. I was excited because you're like, I don't think this needs to be adapted to TV. But wait, Craig Mazin's on board, and okay, yeah, like you guys, not to repeat what you said, but that was when I was like, all right, I trust them. I will say I had 2 different concerns. Number one was potentially they would over gamify it in some ways, try to make it too hokey. I wasn't overly worried about that, but that's always just anytime we get a video game adaptation, I'm always worried that they're going to try to do gimmicks like that. Kind of similar to the first person perspective thing where you're like, and they have little nods to it, but they're in on the
Nothing
joke.
over. Yeah. So
yeah, I also was a little worried they might try to soften the blow of the twists or the violence, specifically what we saw in the last episode, because I'm sitting here and I was like, especially the more audiences were like, this show is so good. I was like, oh man, I cannot wait to see what you think of the last episode. Because you're either going to hate it or, yeah. So I was a little, I would say that was a kind of again, minor, given that we had, especially Druckmann, just as much as Mazin. I was like, this is his baby. He's not going to let them tamper with it, air quotes, too much. And I guess this is more of an aside, less of a concern. To see Pedro Pascal in the role of Joel, such a great casting choice, but also it's just really hard whenever you have the version from the games that I think was so freaking good. Mm-hmm. It's not like it was an okay performance that you have Pedro Pascal and 1-up. It's no. I really, truly think that Troy Baker is the character in the game. It was such a definitive thing. He helped build the character. I was worried. I was like, I don't want Pedro Pascal to replace that in my mind. And also, I don't know how he could, because there's just nothing he could bring to it that would be better. It's just different, which is what we got. All right, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we've talked a lot about what we bring to the table. Let's get into our review of The Last of Us Season 1.
If you don't think there's hope for the world, why bother going on?
You haven't seen the world, so you don't know. You keep going for family.
I'm not family.
No? You're cargo.
Why are you so important?
Somewhere out west, they're working on a cure. I think what really impressed them was the fact that I didn't turn into a monster.
If she so much as twitches, don't.
Yeah, okay.
If I'm taking you with me, you do what I say when I say it. You got any advice on the best way west? Yeah, go east.
So according to IMDb, The Last of Us is described as, after a global pandemic destroys civilization, a hardened survivor takes charge of a 14-year-old girl who may be humanity's last hope. So we've already noted here, Craig Mazin, showrunner from Chernobyl. Neil Druckmann actually was a co-creator of the original game. This television series is the first from Sony's recently formed entertainment division, PlayStation Productions. So whether we like video game adaptations or not, they are coming in and coming in fast, because we have Twisted Metal that's set to debut on Peacock later this year. We also have from PlayStation Studios, a God of War adaptation is set for Amazon Prime, and then the Horizon series is set for a contract. It's contracted over at Netflix. So yeah, so many more to go. There's also several film adaptations coming down the pipeline from PlayStation Productions, a Gran Turismo movie, Days Gone movie, Ghosts of Tsushima movie from the director of John Wick. That one's the one I'm really curious about. We've already noted here. So the key talent behind the video game, Troy Baker played Joel. You have Jeffrey Pierce, who played Tommy, his brother in the video games, and then Ashley Johnson, who plays Ellie. All three of them did make appearances in the show. It goes without saying the show was a hit, but I wanted to provide a little bit of a breakdown here. I was also curious to see how big this show was going to be, because I was like, well, the game fans are going to show up. Is there still an appetite for popular zombie fiction, like thinking about the Walking Dead and how that was winding down? Well, the first episode debuted with 4.7 million viewers across all platforms on its first evening. And by the end of the season, the finale had increased to 8.2 million viewers, which is a 75% increase in the evening, in its first evening. And that was going up against the Academy Awards the same night. So needless to say, this show is a raging success. Most shows you get a big opening and you slowly kind of whittle down to your core audience, whereas this is really fun to watch. The ratings come in every week. As a season of TV, what did you think of The Last of Us? Harold Story, I'm going to start with you.
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I like I was saying, I didn't play the game, so I almost feel like it's a luxury of going in with no expectation. The only thing I'd seen was like that first intro, and like the cinematic. And so I was just basically, and that doesn't even really get into the proper story. So just knowing that it was going to kind of be this like emotional pull thing, I just kind of went in to every episode like, man, I don't know what was going to happen next. Like, this is crazy. And so, it just kept me going. And, we got episodes of this, like the episode, with Nick Offerman, that was just like completely at left field for me personally. I'm like, what in the world? Which I understand that doesn't really follow the game extremely close
At all.
But probably one of my favorite episodes of a show I've seen in like probably the last few years, just in general of like the storytelling and what it made me feel. That's always kind of the thing that makes me decide like how I, what I think about something. It's like, did that really like hit me in the feels? And that one was just like, wow, this is very good. But yeah, all in all, I was very, very impressed. I was entertained the entire time. There's something that I liked in every single episode, something that I remember in every single episode. And then, I didn't play the game, obviously, I keep saying, but that last episode, I was shook for sure. I was like, wow.
Let me ask you, was that a plus or a detractor?
No, it was like a whoa. Like, I did not expect them to do. I don't know how much we want to get into it too much already, but when he shoots Marlene, I was like, holy shit. Like, this is crazy. Just because, like, they have history and everything from, how they interact and, like, how they talk to each other and, like, the whole undertaking of the task of taking Ellie and everything. But yeah, I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, where are they going to go after this? This is so nuts. So yeah, it was like, definitely I'm on the hook for next season. I'm like, it can't get here fast enough for me to see what happens next.
Man, I hate to tell you, it's probably going to be a couple of years, but
It's
such a long way, but
the worst.
It's one thing about being invested in these things.
For sure. Yeah, that's why I was like, dang, I should have waited.
but it's going to be so good when it shows up.
Yeah, but I really enjoyed it. I'll probably rewatch it with. My wife's pretty fickle about things, like so usually I'll like watch it, and I don't mind rewatching stuff. And so she doesn't like horror a lot, and to me, I'm like, this is actually something that someone that is not too into horror could watch and like really have a good time with.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to rewatch it with her soon.
It's a great character drama. That's
It is.
the thing. It just so happens to be set in a post-zombie apocalypse world, you know?
In a weird way, it kind of appeals to both of those,
It does, yeah.
those groups, you know? So
It's funny, like the way I feel sometimes is like when they would show up, I'd be like, oh yeah, there's zombies in this.
Yeah.
It's like I'm more concerned with like what the people are doing and like the story of the people versus like, oh yeah, there's also these insane, gigantic zombies coming out of the ground or whatever that guy was in the sniper episode. But
Oh, man, that sniper episode
was nuts.
wild. I remember... Yeah, we'll get into it. Joe Light, what did you think of the first season of The Last of Us?
One of the best experiences watching TV ever, I would say. Cried so much, like until I was dehydrated on multiple episodes. Yeah, it was great. Early in the year, I was set to interview John Pano, who's the production designer. So I got actually the first 4 episodes early.
nice.
Yeah, and so I had seen episode 3, that Nick Offerman episode, like way before a lot of other people, and keeping that inside was
So hard.
It
I can't wait for
was-
other people to watch this.
I know, it's like this is the great exactly what you said, like this is potentially like the best episode of TV that any of us are going to see like in years,
yeah.
potentially ever, because it's just so beautiful. So yeah, very it's going to be very close to my heart, the experience of watching the show, and I think that it's just perfect. I loved it. I don't really have any.
Nice.
I'm not going to be nitpicky. I just loved it so much.
I love to hear that. Oh, man. Episode 3, I know we're probably going to talk about that quite a bit on this episode, but I just have to say that seriously might be the best love story I've ever seen on television. And that's like going up against The Constant on Lost, which I swore was like the
I
bar.
know. Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know, man. This one's pretty good.
It's
like
so
it-
good.
I watched that with my fiance on the couch, and it was like at least twice we were both getting real weepy eyed, especially the scene with the strawberries. Just really underscored the whole reason
Man,
that
I
you
know.
need, it's like why they needed each other.
So
you know?
many lines.
Oh my gosh.
So many lines.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, but LaRon Chapman, what did you think of The Last of Us season 1?
You know, I went into this with a lot of anticipation, which also made me a little nervous because I'm like, you know, they've set a bar here. Everyone's telling me this is great. And now the film critic in me is like ready to like say, you were wrong.
Right.
It's like, but I did. I was so taken by it. You know, the characters are so well drawn. The stakes are very well laid out. And I think that the setting is very like richly realized, you know, and so it's great to hear that some of the things that weren't in the game and the things that were modified or changed, obviously things that me and you and I wouldn't have known, still impacted each side the same way, you know, because I will say equally as we talk about our favorite episodes later, that yeah, the 3 came out of nowhere, and it just kind of hits you right in the heart, and it just, you know, things like that kind of just surprise you, like you're not expecting from a show like this to have this groundswell of emotion, you know, come out of it, you know, especially when you're talking again about a zombie fiction game, video game. You know, you put that string of adjectives together in a sentence, and you're like, I'm not gonna cry at this show, and I did several times, you know. So, no, I do. I think it was a really, really strong season, and I'm very excited to see what comes next.
All right. Daniel Stoll, what was your take here?
I mean, yeah, I loved it. I think, you know, I'm trying to not think about it as an adaptation, but just as TV on its own merits. But I think what it did so well is it created like such deep and rich characters in such a short amount of time. Like we keep talking about like the Frank and Bill episode, and it's like, oh, they were only in one episode. Like, you know what I mean? But it had left such a lasting impact. I think about like Henry and Sam from the 5th episode. Like, really, they're only in one episode, but it's like such a deep like impact that episode left on me. And I think that like the way that the show did that was just so masterful, and getting us to care so much about these characters with you know, in an very efficient way. And so, yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved it. I think that for me, I was also glad to see that like kind of what I talked about, what I enjoyed about the game so much was there, that this idea that like all the violence in it felt really uncomfortable. Like even your protagonist performing violence, it's like, ugh, like this, like you feel how devastating the fact that this violence is occurring is to the characters. And so I think you just like, yeah, I think those are what it did so well. So, I mean, kind of like what Joe said, like, I'm not going to nitpick this. Like it was so incredible and a great experience. I think that, when comparing it to like other prestige, it's like probably going to, I don't want to like jump ahead and have like this emotional reaction so early, but it's probably going to be one of my favorite shows of all time. Like that's how it feels.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the show's outstanding. I think it's a triumph of video game adaptation. I think it's a triumph of zombie fiction, frankly. Like I seriously thought I thought The Walking Dead had killed any interest I would have in zombie TV. No offense if people out there like that show. I'm not trying to knock it. I just got tired, I think was my thing. And I mean, gosh, I think I went like 15 seasons. Again, not knocking anyone out there who loves The Walking Dead. There's a lot of things to like about it. Joe's looking at me like
I agree. I haven't. I've tried to start it so many times, and I can't.
Yeah.
I can't get into it.
There was like 3 seasons where I just convinced myself. I'm like, it'll get better, because I had a thing where I would go over and watch. That was a show that I had a friend, like a group, we'd watch it every Sunday night, and I started doing that in college and stuck around for years. And then, but the last like 3 years, I was like, I just found myself just wanting to talk to them or watch something else the entire time. I was like, haven't we seen this plot play out like 4 other times? Anyway,
it's kind of like the Grey's Anatomy of the
Yes.
genre. It just went on for too long, and at some point, it's like you can't distinguish when did my interest leave? You know what I mean? Like, and it's gone on for so long. At this point, it's like it's not saying anything new.
I'm not trying to knock that. All I'm saying is I really thought I was done with zombie TV after that, after like sticking that out for so long. And I really think The Last of Us is exceptional because it does pay such close attention to the characters, as everyone around the table has already said. And again, very clear goals, very clear beginning, middle, and end, very clear themes it wants to bring to the surface, and does so in really, really, really smart and emotional ways. And, I just think that it is up there with the Game of Thrones and the Successions, to some of my favorite shows, but it's kind of on its own little lane. It's doing its own thing in a way that I've never seen done in zombie fiction today, on the level and of the caliber you'd see from other prestige HBO dramas. So it's top notch. I think there was a couple episodes I liked more. There were certainly episodes I liked more than others, but I'm not going to sit here and say there was no bad episodes. There was no even mediocre episodes. There's just certain episodes I liked a lot more than others. But, at the end of the day, I think the missteps this series has are very, very minor versus the things it did right. So I think this is an overwhelming success creatively. Now, when we compare this to other post-apocalyptic zombie stories, I've already laid out my hand here, the fatigue. But I think another thing that's important to remember about the game is the game comes out in 2013. Zombie fiction up until that point has been, yes, The Walking Dead's a big one, but video games, Resident Evil, you have Dawn of the Dead, the 28 Days, all those movies that we all said we liked earlier, those were all out and around. What does The Last of Us do successfully to set itself apart from those stories? Does it do anything super new or interesting? I mean, I know for me, I just kind of laid out there my favorite parts. I also was thinking, I was like, there hasn't really been a good zombie road show really that I could think of that come to mind where you're like going on a destination, right? LaRon, what do you think? What do you think sets this apart from other zombie stories?
It just kind of strips away the flashiness and the artifice that might exist, with that medium in general. And I'm speaking of video games. And I feel like what it does is it takes an emphasis on these characters and makes it, again, it seems like this is actually like the perfect video game to adapt. It's all for this type of medium. And maybe the problem is so many, like you said, so many prior to this didn't lend themselves to cinematic. They had to fill in too many holes. There's too much of a scattered around plot to kind of stitch together to make cohesive and impactful and well drawn. And I think with this, because these characters are so dynamic, they are so dimensional in this world, in this universe, and the conflicts that are in the story are universal and can, doesn't necessarily have to be zombies, but it just happens to be in this case. That this particular, game lent itself to being a really well drawn episodic show. And I think that that we're just lucky in that way, because this is something that I think that I'm a passive, gamer. I don't do a whole lot with it, and I didn't need to enjoy this show, because I think that foundation was set up very clearly in the game and in the show. So,
do you think it how do you so as a video game, there's a lot of differences you just laid out, but what about when you're comparing it to, say, Dawn of the Dead or 28 Days Later? Or what do you think it does differently to kind of separate it from that ground that we've already covered?
I think it's emphasis on humanity. It's emphasis on those universal truths that we all share. Because it doesn't have to be, the zombies are there, but the story isn't really about them. They're a conflict in the peripherals, but they're not the conflict of the story. There are internal conflicts that these characters are going through. Joel's dealing with grief. He's dealing with loss, so there's those things that we can relate to as human beings, that it's kind of infused in this, and it's in the forefront of the storytelling, that I think keeps it grounded. Even when we get into the more supernatural elements of the story, we're able to receive those things a little bit better, and we don't have to suspend belief so much because we're invested emotionally in the story and the characters. So,
Harold, what do you think? I mean, when you compare this up against other zombie fiction you've seen, it could even be, there's a lot of zombie anime out there too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, candidly, I think it's just, someone else asked me this, and it was like, the only thing I could think is I really just did not give a shit about those people and that other stuff. These characters are wow. For me, whenever I, watch something like this, and whenever something hits me, it's at an emotional level, and I can't help but see myself in characters, or see things that I like about myself or that I don't like about myself, or situations where I've been in a similar place where I've had to make a decision that was difficult, and you're like, wow, this is really there. This is how human beings act.
Yeah.
And I've said on before, we did I think the last time I was on was the Everything Everywhere All at Once. Mm-hmm. I've said before, I'm a huge A24 guy, and I think it is. I don't want to speak out of my ass now that I said that, but It Comes at Night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that reminds me. It reminds me so much of this because it's there's this thing that happened, this tragedy, this pandemic, and this sickness that's going around, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, this is so scary." The real conflict in that movie was between other people between themselves, and that was such a powerful thing for me in this show too. It was like, Laurent, you said it too. It's the zombies is the way that the story is delivered, but it's not really even really about that. All the huge moments for me in this came from a lot of those moments had nothing to do with the zombies. It was because of that they happened, sure.
Yeah.
But the moments rarely involved the actual Walking Dead aspect of it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it's always been such an interesting idea to me that no matter what awful things going on, humans are actually really the worst thing for each other. And yeah, I mean, it just, when something makes me feel, I'm like, this is really good. This is very good. I'm connecting with this at an emotional level. Sure, I have a good time with the 28 days later, 28 weeks later, but I never cared about the actual relationship between, the Robert Carlyle character and his family. It was that was just a kind of a delivery method of the story. It was oh, okay, these are his kids, whatever.
And those are definitely stories that are very why I really, really love both of the 28 Days movies. Those have, I think, more pointed political messaging,
sure.
thematically, and the characters are a vehicle for the message and the ideas versus this where I feel like the characters are really the forefront. And yes, obviously you're trying to communicate larger themes, but it's all rooted in characterization.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's just the thing that has set it apart for me is that, you know, those moments, and we're going to talk about like some of our favorite moments, and every moment is dealing like none of the ones that I'm going to mention ever, like when they killed that one zombie, it was when this extremely hard thing happened and someone had to deal with it. And it made me think of a time in my life when I had to deal with something very difficult. And it was just like, how difficult is that? How hard is that? And just the level of acting is just insane in this, just because you're like, is this a documentary? Like, am I even watching? Is this a show? Like, they filmed this? Like...
Right. Definitely they just have a camera crew following around during the COVID pandemic. Yeah.
Great acting like that is just like, this is crazy, man. Like, you couldn't have convinced me that this didn't really happen to these folks.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when I think about this story, like even as, you know, some of you guys have already mentioned, there's not a lot of zombies in this show. Like there's like, I can think of maybe like 3 sequences. It uses that setting to get to these really deep and thoughtful characters and their relationships with each other. I think that really stands apart, you know, from the other zombie genres. What this show is able to do, because it's not focused on like making sure we have all these action sequences in every episode, it really allows us time to get to know the characters a lot more than maybe your typical zombie show or movie would. And that's why we have such deep connections and love for them, is because we're not like, we don't have to like get in our action sequence first. Like we can just spend the time with the characters, really get to understand them and know them, and then fall in love with them, and then feel all the things when they have to make these like you know, terrible decisions or great decisions or whatever. Like we really feel it then. When the action does actually show up, we feel so connected that it's a lot more impactful. It doesn't just seem like the action isn't forced or you know, some sort of quota that we're trying to make. So I think that for me really is what makes Last of Us stand out.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the video games where, you know, you literally murder dozens or hundreds of people on a mission and then you kill someone else, and it's like, well, that feels kind of weird. Like, I mean, I know it's sad that he killed this person, but didn't we just see him kill like 100 other people? You know,
but we're the heroes.
Yeah. That was you know,
never the bad guy in your own story.
And in the defense of The Last of Us, that was actually a big. That was a criticism I primarily lobby at the Uncharted series, where there's like a scene where it's like, "Yo, I said no guns." I'm like, no guns. You've killed hundreds of people.
Right.
But anyway, Joe, what do you think The Last of Us does successfully? I mean, do you think it's carved out kind of a lane separate from other zombie fiction?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we've touched on it already multiple times, but I think one thing I was thinking about when Daniel was talking was, I think even earlier as we were speaking, it does such a good job of not making the violence like sexy or exciting. It just is really raw. And I think that's also what is obviously very good in the game. Like when you get to play as Ellie against various bad guys, it's really terrifying. So they did that, I think, well in the show too, just in emphasizing like she is totally alone. She is not strong. She has her talents, but they're not nearly anything close to what Joel could do, and she's in real danger. And I think that episode is just great at making that violence really hit really hard, and it's really terrifying. And I think also the end sequence in the hospital, which I'm sure we'll mention, is just like they did not. That part in the game takes so long because you have to kill so many people, and it's like 3 or 4 minutes in the show, and it's not like a sexy action sequence at all. It's just like he's in kill mode, he's gonna murder all these people, and it's really, really awful. And they didn't shoot it in a way that was, again, like making him look cool or sexy or anything. Yeah, it's just like he's in his only mission now is save Ellie, and it's just brutal. So I think that I'm really glad that they made those choices too, just to not make things cool for the sake of it. And just emphasize that.
Yeah, he's not the action hero, you know. I mean, especially that last sequence, which we're going to talk about a lot more here in a second. But like he doesn't just kill them. There are people who literally surrender, and he's like, "You might be a threat someday, so I'm just going to stop you right now." You know, it's pretty awful. Like the audience, you're supposed to understand, like this is violence has meaning in the world of The Last of Us, even though the world's falling apart. Like the actions have real weight, both for the world that he's in, but also for him personally. You know, there's things. His humanity is being sacrificed when he kills people like that. Yeah, I think those are all great things to outline here. We're going to dive into, I think, specifically the ending here in a moment. Before we do, a couple quick questions. We'll go around the table for this. What were your 2 favorite episodes and why? And the reason I put 2 is I have a strong hunch all of us might be saying episode 3 long time, the one featuring Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett. But maybe we just take a second to gush about how that's the greatest love story in TV in at least a decade, if not like ever. Thoughts, anybody?
Oh yeah, definitely, man. It was such a unexpected part. I mean, there was only 2 episodes before that. Is that episode 3 or 4?
3.
Yeah.
3.
So there are 2 episodes leading up. You're like, oh, okay, this is like, I kind of see what this. And then that episode's kind of like, well, what? Actually, what is this show? And you know, I think, you know, when I mentioned earlier was that I can't help but see myself whenever I'm, you know, in media like this, and to have someone that you care about that much, it's just such a powerful thing. And that's why, like, the acting is just incredible. And even just the way that they shoot this, the way that they shot that episode, you know, the progression of it where they're like, he's just like unsure. They're unsure of each other at first, and I'm just going to be here for a night. And then next thing you know, they're walking out arguing about like how they need to change things and like change things around the city. And obviously he's been there for a minute now. Like,
You don't realize that immediately.
yeah, it's
much
just
time
like,
has
oh, okay.
passed.
Passage of time like is kind of being addressed there. And that, you know, it wasn't just like I'm staying here for the night, getting supplies and leaving. That was just very powerful to me. Just like the entire storytelling element of it too.
It also has the best joke in the show. I thought the
one's
joke
that?
about the this isn't an Arby's. He's like, wait, people don't come to Arby's for free food. You have to pay. It's a restaurant.
It is, yeah. It was very unique. One of the more unexpected parts of the show for me, especially. It stands out so like it has such a contrast to the other episodes of the show to me. I think it's why you have. I mean, you're probably right. Everybody's like, that's probably one of my favorite episodes of the season.
It's funny because it's like there was a couple of different reactions I saw online, and one of them was, "Oh, this show is just so heartbreaking." I was like, "Guys, that was the happy episode."
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Lauren, what did you think of episode 3?
I think what I like about it is just that it was a really bold, creative choice to make. Because as I understand, it's not part of the game. I mean, at least explicitly, the way that it is here. Because it ran the risk of alienating fans. It ran the risk of alienating the new audience. You know, I think it's a risk that paid off because I think universally, everyone seems to have enjoyed it. But what I think it is, it was necessary too. Because I think what it does in this long form, more nuanced approach to the story is it really emphasizes those themes, you know, that they're, you know, in one case, like, yeah, we're surviving or we're fighting for survival or, you know, we're fighting to live. But if we don't have anything to live for, what is the point of doing all of this? And this is a beautiful episode that just really encapsulates that theme very well, where these two people have found a reason to live for each other, you know, and so, and that you can let the feeling that gives you, you know, go through the rest of the show, you know, with every character and every decision that's made and why they do the things that they do. So.
Joe, anything to add?
You were my purpose. One of the best lines ever.
You tear up just hearing it just now.
So the acting. Mwah.
I don't know
So
how
good.
you didn't get to talk to people for so long after watching it. That's crazy.
It was hard. Yeah, it was hard.
You were like, y'all just wait.
Yeah. I would be like, just warning, sort of get your tissues out. That's all I would say.
I remember hearing the early buzz about it, and I was like, really? I mean, I was excited because it was Nick Offerman, and the character's very prominent for a section of the games. Also, the story in the games, this is what we will kind of spoil the games a little bit. The story in the games is actually an extremely sad story.
Yeah, it's awful.
Where Frank resents Bill for keeping him trapped in the town, and you actually discover so basically Bill is like he's a guy who's kind of like gone off the deep end. He's talking to himself, hearing voices in his head, sort of thing. Really fascinating character on his own still. And you discover, so you hear about the partner, but you never see him until when you're on a mission. If you adventure and explore, you can find his body where he's hung himself. And then if you look in the desk near the body, you find a note where he basically talks about how he hated Bill for trapping him in the town, and how I'm dead, but at least I'm not stuck with you in this town. It's like the opposite. Yeah, it's a dark, sad ending. So I was thinking, I was like, oh, yep, the show is just going to be super sad. And so when it shows up and it's like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful love story. You are my purpose. The whole sequence with the strawberries where you see so clearly how, Frank needs the survivalist to, survive, but Bill is literally would just be a crazy conspiracy theorist just living in paranoia for his whole life.
Needs somebody to remind him to be a human being.
Right. That life is worth living, There's things in life that are worth it,
Yeah.
Painting the houses so it feels like a town. Making friends.
Yes.
Because that gets
So good.
lost, when you're dwelling on the dread of the situation and you're going through this. You're like, I want to live, but you're like, but everything's misery around you. You know what I mean? So it takes a moment of calm for you to realize that, what we live for is that connection with other human beings, and so I think it was a beautiful way to, something to include into the story to add depth, so.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so touching. Daniel, any thoughts? Anything you want to add about episode 3? Long time.
I mean, yeah, it was also going to be on my favorites list. It's probably one of the best episodes of TV ever for me. It's just beautiful. I mean, and I'm a person who gets emotional at everything, but I was just weeping when I was watching that. And the exact opposite of me is my wife. She never cries at anything while we're watching, and she was weeping. I was like, okay, this is what gets her, so we had that together, which was really nice too. So, but yeah, it definitely, one of the few times where I feel like I've seen a single episode, I'm like, please give this one actor an Emmy for this one episode. Please just do it.
They both get Emmys. How do I know they're probably competing against each other, but can you give both Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett Emmys?
They share.
Yeah. I mean, and this is where I think that the adaptation piece becomes so powerful, other than just a scene of television, taking, like you said, we don't get to know a ton about Frank, but it's a very different story in the way that they take that and make it this beautiful story about love and it was just like you all said, it's incredible. So
and also in the grander scheme of things, I think that was where I really felt this theme of love as more of a consistent theme throughout the series. I feel like they really set it in place there, because you see what people who are in love are willing to do for one another when they care that deeply, especially when you're in a world that is just falling apart. How valuable that and rare that kind of connection is really sets the tone for what we see with Joel and Ellie in terms of, at that point in the story, they aren't very close, but as they go and grow together throughout the story, you're like, oh man, this is a world. And when you find that person, you do whatever it takes
to make foreshadowing their relationship almost.
Mm-hmm. Other than that, quickly go around the table. Laurent, what was another episode that you wanted to call out?
I really liked episode 5. I think this is the episode where the groundswell of zombies pull up. I just think that entire episode is just so, as far as tensions, just masterful. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of crescendos there at the end, and you're just like, holy shit. We've come all the way to this point where, the zombies, again, were such an afterthought from the tension that we were feeling with just the interaction with the two the characters in this, and the opposing sides. And then the zombies add an extra level of, oh shit, well, I don't know what to do now. So I was like, oh yeah, they're here too. So yeah, deal with that while you deal with this, so. I just thought it was a great episode in terms of tension. I really like the addition of the Kathleen character. Mm-hmm. Do I understand she was also not in the game?
Right. Now that was what's interesting. So that character was really interesting because, again, in the games it's set in Pittsburgh, not Kansas City, but it's very unclear why these dudes are, because it's mostly men in the games as well, are trying so hard to kill you, and they give it a face. You get the face of the Kathleen character, but you also get the motivation, which is, she killed. So this whole thing, we just took Fedra out. We took out the oppressive regime, but one of the losses was her brother that Henry sold out for drugs. Again, kind of foreshadowing the kind of conundrum we'll find Joel and Ellie in later, and what that costs people down the road. It just, that whole scenario plays out way more fulfilling than the games, and I thought the games were fine, but this added a lot more context.
Because she's a really complex villain, and I think Melanie Lazinski's just like.
Yeah. Amazing.
It's crazy seeing her play a villain. She's such a sweetheart, and she's so funny and warm. So seeing her do this was actually really compelling to watch too.
She's like, what would my brother do? The one we all loved. He would tell me to have grace, but then I'm like, but why?
But she just
There's no vengeance there. Also, how dare they make us love Henry and Sam? I'm not going to trust any show forever. For now, I'm like, dang it, because at the end I'm like, I guess they're going to be 4 people moving along now. And then,
a lot of people thought that. I think.
Yeah, I think so too. That was
broke my heart.
That was a tough one to watch too, knowing what was coming. I was like, oh no. And that's the scene at the end of so the episode 5, Endure and Survive. That's another one where I just couldn't even talk when it was over. And I'd experienced it through the games, but it's just like how tragic that whole scenario is just from the framework. But then when you see that Henry does and he just reacts, and like how it impacts Ellie and Joel, you're just like, oh my gosh. This is all just so sad.
Yeah, I'm like, maybe Ellie's blood will save him. Maybe it will.
5 was also going to be my other episode that I picked, and I think like what you guys are talking about with Henry and Sam, it's like we just talked about this beautiful love story, and then this is like the tragic love between these like siblings, right? Like it's a different type of love, but like how deeply they love and care for each other, and then there's this terrible tragedy that happens, and how Henry can't deal with that. But I think it's also a really important moment for Ellie too, because you get to see like in this world where she has no reason to have like any sort of positivity or love or care. She like desperately wants to be like a force of positivity, the way that like she takes her blood and tries to like put it on him. And so yeah, for me, like that sequence is just like another like just incredible highlight of the show for me. So
Joe, what was another one of your favorite episodes?
It's really hard. I also really like episode 4 for the moments that we get where Joel is finally starting to soften toward Ellie. Like I think that's the episode where they have the pun book. I think that's where he like first laughs at the very end of that episode. Him like watching over her as they're camping. I just love all of those little character moments that they so clearly show that he's like, God dang it, I'm a dad again. And he's like coming to terms with it. I also just really like the finale, even though it's really hard to watch, and I cried that whole episode as well. So it's hard. It's bittersweet because if you've played the game, what is coming, but the giraffe, it's all just so beautiful.
The giraffe,
yeah, So I think those are other 2 standouts for me.
Talk about a moment they didn't change at all from the games. The giraffe. I was kind of curious about what they were going to do. They even used the same music.
Yeah.
It's exactly as it is in the video game. You're like, wow, we just went through a whole bunch of really terrible stuff, and then you see the giraffe pop its head in.
Yeah. Oh, but what I love about the game, just to sidebar a little bit, is that you can stay in that moment, and I do whenever I play it through again. Like, you can stay watching those giraffes for as long as you want to, basically, with the sun coming down. It's a very beautiful scene in the game, and I just, like, stand there for a very long time because I know that coming up next is a massacre.
Very sad, yes.
Enjoy this moment of calm.
Yeah.
Well, you can. Harold, any other episodes you want to give a shout out to?
I really like this episode 7, Left Behind. It's when... early you hear Ellie tell Joel, this isn't the first time I've killed somebody. And then that's kind of intriguing to me because, someone that didn't play the game. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting because, there's like that where is that going to come up later? Or we're going to hear more about that.
Right.
And then just that entire, I think it's Storm Reed plays the Riley. I love Euphoria. And so she plays Rue's little sister in Euphoria. So it's just, powerhouse of performances in the show, even the small moments. But just that entire, I don't know, Bella Ramsey, there's moments in that where I keep hearkening back to this thing of seeing myself, and like, you can't help but think to the first time you were like romantically involved with somebody, and how like it's like exciting and scary to be vulnerable to somebody, and how is it going to go, and then to see how it ends up, and it ends up so tragically, you're like, God, like this show is just gonna break my heart every episode. Like,
If you're feeling warm, something's up.
I know, like something's about
happen.
to elbow drop my heart real quick.
For every Mortal Kombat moment, there's always got to be a catch.
But I love that episode, just the whole mall thing, and because that's like a big kid thing too. You're like, oh man, this would be so cool if I could just go run around the mall on my own, like, and play all the games and go to all the places. And I don't know, just like a very human experience, trying to give her a very sense of like normal in this abnormal world.
Yeah.
I know they described it on the Last of Us podcast as it's like the episode where we wanted to create the version of a story where you cut class to go to the arcade.
Yeah.
You know? And I thought they
Very
did a great
much
job
that
at
vibe.
that. Also, the fun fact that arcade was all done, like when they walk in, you see the lights turn, and that was all CG. And apparently it like, from what I understand, was like one of the more complicated visual effects in the whole series, which was
Dang, I
It read.
didn't even
It
know that
read.
was CG.
It read.
That's so cool. I'm going to give a shout out to episode 6, Kin. That's where we get to see Joel reunite with Tommy. And that was super powerful because what's interesting is the show actually humanizes Joel a little more, because in that first episode, it's like he still wants to get back to Tommy, whereas in the games, like he only goes to Tommy because he has no choice. He's like, I know he knew some fireflies one time. I want to get rid of this girl. I'm going to go find Tommy. I know generally where he's at.
He wasn't like, oh my God, the whole thing is to find him.
Right. He wasn't like, oh, I'm trying to find out why he's not responding to our radio messages. That was new. Right.
Wow.
So it actually gives him a little more of humanity right from the jump versus the games where it's like they had in the games, there was a very bad fall. I guess it's kind of implied in the show too. They had a very bad falling out, and they had no interest in talking again. That said, it's very similar feeling when they reunite. Like, oh my gosh, I finally get to see Tommy, and only for as soon as that like warm fluffiness wears off, you're like, oh wait, there's a reason we didn't like stay together. And it also reveals a lot about Joel's character and his intentions. Like, Joel does not seem to regret the kind of person he's had to be. Versus Tommy, who's like, listen, like I'm out. Like we have a nice thing going here. This is it. Like what? Like we're building a home, and he's getting married. You know, like, and it sounds like they might even want to have kids. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so the other thing I like about it is it's a nice contrast to Joel and Ellie make a very active choice to pursue their journey after arriving at what could be considered a safe haven where they could just stay. Right? They have a choice. They could call off their mission. But Ellie in particular is so dedicated to the mission that they decide to go. It's also where Ellie and Joel have their big kind of like falling out amongst themselves. There's an entire gameplay sequence in the game that's not in the show where Ellie runs away and you have to go chase her down, and there's a bunch of gameplay in between there. But the scene where they kind of confront each other and she says, you know, I'm not your daughter, that sort of thing. It's just like, oh, they didn't change a beat. That specific scene is almost identical
I've
to
been
the
seeing
game.
side by sides on TikTok of like the game versus the, and I'm like, man, this stayed pretty true to a lot of these moments.
Yeah. But I just love it reinforces the relationship between Ellie and Joel, that both of them, like, this is not just a mission, like they're in it together. They have personal skin in the game with each other. But also that their mission isn't a choice that they both decide to make.
And he didn't, man, he could just, I feel like you could really tell, like, he did not want to care about this girl. He did not want to get involved. And it just, he's a dad, and then just, you know, he gets those feelings again, and it's so complicated, and they don't shy away from like telling you like he's not a good dude. He did some pretty bad stuff.
Right.
So it's just so complex. I'm like, God, this is so
he's
good.
still capable of empathy.
Yes.
And that's the human element here that it kind of
so good.
reigns in. So
Well, let's jump ahead a little bit. I want to I want to make sure we leave enough quality time to talk about the ending, because obviously it's as Joe put it a moment ago, a massacre. It is very sad. So I'm going to start with LaRon and Harold, because you two did not know what was coming. LaRon, what did you make of the ending of this first season?
I'm so conflicted. I feel like the logical part of my brain was very frustrated because the whole mission was to do this thing. But then the emotional part of my brain was devastated because I too did not want to see Ellie perish. So I understood the moral dilemma. Even looking at the outcome, I understood if I was Joel, could I do it? You know what I mean? Like, to lose it. And also I think what you're bringing to it too is that, you know, he lost his daughter, You know what I mean? So this is re-traumatizing, in this way. It's like I have an opportunity now to change something, to do something different, to save this person's life, even if it is at the expense of humanity, all of humanity.
And it's also I thought they did a really good job. There's a new scene, but it's a really powerful moment when she's like, "I'm glad time enabled you to get past your daughter's death," and he's like, "It wasn't time that did it." Like, this is his this Ellie, like he's been in this rut for 20 years.
This has been my surrogate, daughter for this length of time, and so I was conflicted because obviously it presents a very unique conflict for the story moving forward. But I understood on a human level why he couldn't. So
True.
Harold, what'd you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, almost carbon copy of Ron, like, and also from what I understand, like, they're not, I mean, it's not a positive sure thing that it would actually be able to make a cure or save, like, they think maybe that there was something up. So that is definitely, it's funny, we have this, I mean, it's just like human nature, you have like the subjectivity where you're like, well, of course, it's the right thing to do, and then when you're in that moment, and when it's you, you're like, it's like, well, what happened? I thought it was the right thing to do. Like, so it's just very funny to just, you have that in your mind when it's someone else. Here's what I couldn't be me. I would know exactly what to do, in that moment.
It's that scene in every zombie movie where the infected gets, like you're there, you kill the person that's infected, no questions asked. And then as soon as it's your loved one that's infected, they try to harbor them and save them, even though they know it goes against logic. It goes against, like, there's nothing you can do with the situation.
Mekhi Phifer's wife in Dawn of the Dead.
That's exactly what comes to mind.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that was like, but just the whole situation. And it just always keeps going back to that humanization thing of, putting yourself in that place of like, God, like, this could have saved everybody maybe in the world that was, all these people that were infected, but maybe it couldn't. And he had such a emotional tie, like this attempt at redemption from, losing his daughter in his mind, I think. So it's just such a complicated situation. I think that's what made it so good.
Added wrinkle too. Ellie, do you think Ellie, we don't really get clear insight into what Ellie would, if Ellie given the choice of what she would have done.
Right.
But it seems implied, both in the game and in the show, that she probably, like, this was her purpose.
Her mission.
Mission. She would have probably wanted to finish the mission.
Yeah.
What do you think that, because when you do it, when you frame it that way, not only is Joel killing a ton of people, he's actively taking away her ability to make a decision.
The agency.
He's the agency, right?
Yeah.
So he's taking that away from her, and then he lies to her about it.
I think because we don't know, it's just too difficult to.
Right.
I mean, it's just so difficult to know. I mean, maybe in the game, does it? I mean, maybe in the game, she's like, "Why did you do that? I would have wanted to die." I haven't played the game, so I'm not sure if that happens.
Yeah, no, that is not addressed in the first game.
Okay, so it's just difficult, man. Like, I don't know. It's, what do you do?
Yeah.
And you think you're making, and I think that goes along with him being a parent too. It's like, I think I know what's best, but I don't know. Like, such a nuanced thing.
Well, I have a different question for Joe, you, and Daniel. I wanted to hear about the adaptation choices here. Did this work? Did this land the same way for you? Is it different? Because it is a different experience when you're the guy actually pulling the trigger on all these dudes. Like, how did this experience of watching it versus playing it differ for you?
I mean, as such a huge fan, I'm sitting here thinking, like, I know this is not correct, but I just am over here being like, Joel did nothing wrong. Like, he's perfect. And also thinking, like, actually playing the game, it's not really that hard of a decision. Like, it's the only decision presented to you. But if I feel like for me, it was like, oh, of course, we're going to go kill everyone now. Like, for me, it's like, of course I want to save Ellie. Like, we've been playing together as these characters for hours now, and that now is what I have to go do. So in the game, it feels like logical, I would say.
Do you think that's because in the game you assume the role of Joel?
Yeah.
You are Joel.
Yeah.
And so you
think
his mindset is yours now because you've been playing as him that whole time.
I think absolutely. And I think a lot of people will go into that hospital room and be like, I've seen people go in with like the flamethrower and they're like, and they just like burn all the doctors. They're like very passionate about saving Ellie. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of adaptation, I think that, like I said earlier, it's very well done. For me, it was very refreshing to not go in with that perspective of like, we're the protagonists, we're doing this, like we rule, kill everyone. Like it was very much like, oh, this is actually really awful and terrible. And in terms of the decision itself, I mean, Troy Baker has talked about how the way he sees it is Joel did save the world, and that's because Ellie is his world now. So he like can totally justify that decision as an actor, as a character.
Screw everyone else.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, Joel's perfect. He never makes the wrong decision.
Definitely did not do anything bad. With that in mind, Daniel, what was your take on sort of the adaptation choices here? And I don't know, do you agree? Is Joel perfect? Did he make all the right choices?
I think it's complicated, and I think that it's so like there's so many things I want to say about this that I think it does such an incredible job of adapting it. I think it almost hits me harder in some ways. The emotional impact of their relationship hits me harder when I'm watching the show than it did in the game. But like, there's also stuff about the game where it's like you kind of like what Joe was saying was like, you are the one like pulling the trigger when you're playing the game, and there's like an element like I felt like I don't like these people are just trying to like find a cure. Like why am I killing them? Like but Ellie, like you know what I mean. And I think it's important. You guys kind of mentioned this. Both Joel and Marlene did not consult Ellie. Like you know, neither of them did. Like now. Yeah, like Caleb said, like it's implied that like Ellie would probably make a certain decision, but like we don't know. We didn't ask her. Like, and so I think neither of these characters are like taking what Ellie actually wants into consideration. It's her life, you know. They're both just sort of like, you know, using her for their own, like you know, in their own way, like whether they love her or you know or what. Because like Marlene also has that like relationship with Ellie's mother and like promised to do all these things, but then
that was a nice added touch, by the way, not in the games at all. Was that flashback sequence with Ellie's mom giving birth, and we actually hear about the connection with Marlene in the games. You actually see she was there at the birth.
Oh, in the show. Nice.
Yeah, so that wrinkle makes it like even more complicated, and so like I think what really matters here is that you understand why Joel does what Joel does, and you also understand why it could be seen as problematic. Like you get both. Like, and I think that is what's incredible about this moment is that like I fully understand both of them, both sides, and there's not like I can't say with 100% certainty like this is what should have happened or should have been done. It's like I get all of it. Like, and that's what really sells me on this moment or this ending. And I love the way that it's like framed, as painful as it is. Like he's literally holding Ellie in the exact same way that he's holding Sarah, like with the like this time, like he doesn't fail this time. Like from his perspective, like he talks to Tommy about how much he's failed and trying to like show love and take care of these people, and like he's done failing. Like it kind of goes back to what you guys were talking about earlier. Like he's in this robot. Like I'm not gonna fail again. Like and like I just like. There's so many complex feelings I have about the ending. Like, but I think that's what makes it great is that like, I have no idea what the right thing to do was, but I understand why everybody acts the way they do. So that's what makes it so good.
And that's definitely, I would say that's the most important thing is you understand why everyone does what they do. I think that's what makes it so powerful. And I think it just really elevates the complexity of the human experience and what makes morality so complex. It's really easy to make black and white moral calls until, and this is something, Daniel, you and I had talked about at length on, especially on Game of Thrones, like the most powerful moments of that show similarly place you in scenarios where you're like, I see why everyone's doing what they're doing. And from a certain point of view, they are morally right. So which one's right? What's the right and wrong? Is there a way we could avoid this somehow? Maybe, but it doesn't matter because these are the decisions these people will make based on who they are. And I think this show and the game does a beautiful job outlining that. I'm going to differ from at least Joe a little bit and Daniel to a certain extent. Whenever I played the game the first time, I actively tried to figure out how to not kill the doctor because the way it's when you encounter it the first time, that's where for me, I hit a point, which is bizarre. I know it's a game where I literally just said earlier, I've killed hundreds of people plus zombies on the way there. But you're meeting this person who is basically defenseless. Yeah, he's got a scalpel, but you've got whatever gun you want.
You've got a knife in
Yeah.
the gunfight.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's no way, and like he's a guy who clearly is not seeking ill will. He just is doing what he's convinced is the right thing to do. He's probably only one of a handful of doctors left on the planet who's qualified to even be doing this kind of a surgery. So not only is it a person who's important in the context of Ellie, it's like, no, this guy probably is super like needed in the larger
In his
planet, right?
community, yeah.
And I'm like, it's where I realize, I think we've talked a lot about how when you're playing the game, you're playing as Joel. But a lot of times, Daniel, especially as you said this, you're saying, I did this thing. I did this cool thing. You're sharing your friends. Until that moment, that was where I was like, oh, but I don't want to shoot the doctor.
Right.
Yeah.
So I actually tried to figure, like the very first time I was like, is there like a way to not pop this guy? I'm dead serious.
Could I not do that?
And that's the thing. Because this is a narrative story, that's where I finally am like, oh, Joel's the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like, I understand why you're doing what you're doing, but you don't have a choice. You, as the player, don't have the agency in that moment. You have to do what Joel would do because you were playing the character of Joel, and that's where suddenly I and Joel are not the same person, and I feel very uncomfortable because, oh wait, was Joel bad the whole time? Oh my God, I was playing as Joel the whole time. So it really makes me deeply uncomfortable, and it's one of the things I think makes the video game element so powerful because it's interactive, and you've been participating, and you've been a part of all the things he's been doing the whole time. Now, do I blame Joel? No, and I don't even think like, yes, the man protecting basically his surrogate daughter is the right thing to do, of course, but also just the ethical question is so muddled and we could spend hours talking about it. And I don't think there's a right answer.
Right.
Here's what I will say though. I think the thing is it's really easy to debate about the philosophical and ethical questions. And I think it's important that you do, because I think it's something that we all as humans need to realize that not everything has a right or wrong answer. And sometimes there are reasons wars happen. There are reasons bad things happen. And it's because our sense of morality is subjective, and it's just something to keep in mind. It's part of the human experience. Here's the other thing I want to put out there, and this is something I want to hit on, and I hit on in this little write-up I did. You know, whether it's right or wrong, this is a universe that clearly outlines there are consequences of some sort, both the immediate consequences, which we even see a little bit of when he has to lie to Ellie, and she clearly doesn't buy it. So you're like, okay, so he killed all these people to save her only so that he could lie to her, in which that relationship will never be what it was before. So that's the immediate. And on top of that, and I promise we're not talking about future events or spoilers, but there's a world thing. You just killed a lot of people. Joel is a violent man who has killed a lot of people. And as we've seen throughout this show and in the game, that does not go unanswered. You know, whether it's today, tomorrow, on himself, like there are consequences that will haunt him. And did he do the right thing? I probably would have done the same thing. Yeah. But at the same time, the world he lives in will never be the same after doing that. His relationship with Ella will never be the same. He is irreparably damaged by that decision. Right. And doubly so because he lied about it. That's the other thing that I just think it makes it so much more complicated, because to me that signals that even though he cares about Ellie, he ultimately made what I would consider a selfish decision. He did this for him. Yeah. He did it for Ellie too as a secondary, but it was from he needs her more than she needs him.
Yeah.
It's devastating.
Yeah.
That's like the word I keep, like when I talk to my like students in my class, I'll just say it's devastating, and it just keeps being devastating.
Yes. It never gets easier either, no matter how many times you play it or watch it.
The lie, even in some ways, is more like not worse, but like it's like, man, like the fact that he decides to lie to her, it's like the thing that he wants to save, he can't have because of the way that he did it. Yeah. So like he then has to lie to her, like you say, Caleb, like he can't have like the relationship that we love between the two of them can't ever happen now because he chooses to lie to her.
She doesn't know the truth, but she can clearly tell that she's not being straight with her.
As a fan of the of the games or whatever, like when she looks at him and says, okay, like you feel the weight of like, okay, like she doesn't buy this and our relationship's changed. Like, and it's like that when I saw that moment, I know it's like the literal last second of the show. I was like, oh my God, they did it. Like, it was like, that's how it felt for me. It was like, they nailed like how devastating it is. Like, so the lie for me is like, even like, is like, he tried in the attempt to save her, he ends up losing her. Is how it feels. Like,
But if he doesn't save her, she dies.
exactly. It's
So you're like,
but then maybe humanity could have been. It's there's no right answer
so
here.
crazy.
Well, guys,
So good.
there's so much to talk about here. We are also running long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump ahead just really quickly. I want to talk a little bit about what we hope to see next. Specifically, I want to start, Harold, with you and LaRon. Want to hear kind of what you're hoping to see next. We're not going to spoil season 2. I have a different question for us who've played the game. So Harold, I'll start with you. What is it that you hope to see in the next season?
I mean, I think it has set us up, like Daniel has said, what is the repercussions of that decision and the impact that has on their relationship? How is that going to play out after that? And to what you had said too, Caleb, I mean, I've been thinking about that as well. It's like, this guy's leaving a trail of dead people behind him, and it's just going to come around at some point. I mean, it has to. So whether that's people, coming after him or teaming up or ambushing him, something. I mean, it's just that conflict's going to come back around in some way, and I'm interested to see how that is, how that's handled.
I will say, just be careful, going on, like I've even just scrolling through my YouTube page have seen titles of YouTubes that spoil part 2 of the
watch
so,
out.
I've managed to stay away from it.
just be careful. I don't want
game.
or just play the game. Yeah.
Just play it.
I need to do that.
Go buy a PlayStation 5. They're super easy to get, not expensive, and then the
You
game.
buy the PlayStation 5, I'll buy the games, the 2 games, and then I'll come over and we'll
And a co-op.
tag team
It's
it.
worth it, and it's a long game. It's 30 hours or something.
Yeah, the
geez.
second game is super long.
Wow.
So long that in fact they have announced that the part 2 will not be one season like the first game.
Oh, it's going to be 2 parts.
They didn't say how long. They just said part 2 will not be one season.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, LeBron, what about you? What would you like to see in the next season?
It's more so I'm just curious to discover how this conflict is going to manifest moving forward. How is he going to harbor this secret? How long, if he has harbored it, and how his relationship with Ellie is going to change, and how he's going to, and what are the consequences or the repercussions for the choice that he made? How is that going to manifest both in the humanity being lost, and what is his I guess you say the karma, what's going to come back around here because he did that.
I also wonder when is it going to pick up? Is it going to be years later?
Or we start right back where we started, or where we left off, or are we going to jump in the future a little bit?
Sure.
But very curious.
It's very interesting. A lot of different ways they can go, so it'll be interesting to see.
That was definitely the thing when they announced part 2. I remember Joe and Daniel, I don't know about you guys, but it was one of those where you're similarly, you're what is when are they gonna? How do you follow up the end of that game? Because it's such a haunting, chilling ending. You're what do they do next? But
and the 3 of you have played the game, so you know what's happening. So me and him are about to probably be
I'll probably have
devastated,
heartbroken. Yeah,
But
well, here's what I will say. It is not a spoiler for the plot, but I will just say, as dark as you thought the first season was.
oh no,
Oh, man.
Ain't nothing, man.
I don't know if I can take
Yeah.
this.
That second game is bleak.
I may not watch it then.
Yeah, I think
just kidding.
or watch the game. I think
Oh, the
that would be-
cinematic.
Yeah, you can watch this. Yeah, I think when you were talking about being forced in the game to make decisions, I think that Neil Druckmann saw that and he was oh, here's an opportunity to make that even 10 times worse and force you to play in situations that you never wanted to be in.
Yep, it is. Yeah, exactly. He took
didn't watch
that
that
thing and
cinematic.
amped it up.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
All right. Well, so Daniel, I'll start with you for this then. As a person who has played the game, what would you say is maybe your biggest, could be concern or curiosity about the next season and where they're going with it?
I'm really excited. I think that Neil and Craig have shown that that they're going to deliver a really, really good story with really, really rich characters. There is a lot of controversy around the second game, and so I wonder, I don't quite I know that Neil and Craig are going to tell the story that they want to tell, regardless of what the fan reaction will be, and I'm happy for that. I guess what my biggest curiosity is there's particular characters. I'm like, who are they going to cast for that character? Because like I want to see who they cast for that character and how that's going to play, with what we know from Ellie and Joel. So that's something I'm like excited for to see what they do next, because they've like I think Harold said earlier, like they've sold me on this show. I was already sold from the game, and so I'm in for the long haul. So I'm just excited to see those extra pieces that like we got from this season, like the Bill and Frank story, like the extra like stuff that they add in there, the more developed characters. What characters are we going to get more of in in the second and third seasons that are just like kind of like not as important characters in the game that we now get more time with? Like what would those look like? That's what I'm most excited for.
All right, so casting choices, that's a big one. Joe, what are you most interested, curious, concerned about for next season?
I think having heard that they're not doing it all in one, some of my concerns are already taken care of, because there's so much in the second game, and to give it the treatment that it deserves, it can't be like 9 episodes or whatever. It will need to be more. So I think I just agree with what Daniel said. I trust them. I know that it will be good. I trust that it will be faithful to the game. Yeah, we're gonna cry a lot. I'm gonna cry a lot more. So it'll be good.
Yeah, a couple things. I don't know. Again, more like things I'm just curious about. One is yes, I'm very thankful they're not doing in one season. I'm super thankful they're not doing that. However, while being as vague as possible, with that in mind, how they're going to structure a multiple season arc about The Last of Us Part 2, I'm very curious about, because there's a lot of plot and a lot of different ways they could break it up. And I think that'll make a huge difference. And again, we all complimented the pacing in season 1, but season 2 is a little more complex. Number 2, I got to stay as vague as possible, but there is a moment that I will like just as much as the end of the first season and the first game, as Ellie and Joel overlooking Jackson where he lies to her. There is another scene at the very end of the second game that is just in a totally different way, just as deeply emotional and upsetting and like morally kerfuffling as that even just thinking about it, I start getting like misty-eyed. Like it's a really beautiful but sad and upsetting, all of the things at one time. And now we know it's probably going to be at least 2 seasons before we get there. How are they going to get us there? We'll have to find out. I can't wait. All that said, we've talked about The Last of Us a lot today. I know there's a lot of other things we could say about it, we want to say about it. Final word or final thoughts. Is there anything else you'd like to add about The Last of Us Season 1, anyone?
It was great. It's fantastic as everything everybody said it was going to be. You made a critic soft.
Is it one of those rare times where people hyped it up and it actually
delivered? Yes. Yes.
I think I texted Caleb after episode 5 and it said something like, "I've cried in every episode." Joe was saying, I'm excited to cry in every episode again next season. So
I'm ready to be hurt again.
Yeah,
I'm ready to be hurt again.
I had the thing I like about shows too is when they put little bits in and then you find them and you're like, oh my God, they were just talking about that. So episode 1, they talk about something in Jakarta. And the beginning of episode 2, they're in Jakarta. Mm-hmm. And that episode, the beginning of the episode 2, it hit me emotionally too. And it just shows like how good the writing is for it to be these completely unrelated characters, but for you to be so invested in like the direction and what they're talking about. Which they end up talking to the lady that's the like the head of mushroom studies, I guess. I forget what it was.
Scientist, yeah. There's like fungal diseases. Yeah.
When she's like, "You got to bomb this whole place, man," and I gotta get home, and it's like, oh my God, this is crazy.
That was a great cold open, I have to say.
It's nuts, man.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, those are our overall thoughts on The Last of Us Season 1. How can you let us know what you think? Well, there's a lot of different social media channels. I'm not going to list all of them, but what I will say is you can always email us at thecinematropolis@gmail.com, or you can hit up the Cast Beyond the Wall on Twitter or Facebook. You can also find thecinematropolis.com on Facebook or Twitter at thecinematrop. To all our panelists, thank you so much for taking time out of we're recording this on a Sunday, so thank you for your time on a Sunday afternoon. We'll just go around the table. Let listeners know where they can follow your work. Laron?
You can follow me on Facebook under my name, Laron Chapman, or if you'd like to read my exhaustive film reviews, you can follow me on Letterboxd at black_Cine_man.
Awesome. Joe?
Oh, I need to follow you. I'm also on Letterboxd, but I don't do deep dives. I just goof around. I'm JoJo Binks.
I enjoy those too.
I'm JoJo Binks1 on Letterboxd, and then on Twitter, I'm Joe_lightly.
All right, Harold Story.
Okay, but I will be getting on Letterboxd so I can follow y'all.
Do it. It's so great. You won't regret it.
But
One of us. One of us.
Not The Last of Us, but one of us.
Nice.
But yeah, I would say just follow me on Instagram. I kind of put everything through there. Just at Harold Story, STOREY. If I do interviews, I'll put them through there. I've been trying to do quite a bit more of writing, just depending on what the subject is, interviews and such like that. And then, of course, doing a little bit of art and selling some of my things there, just for different fundraisers and such. I'm like a serial hobbyist, so I kind of have something going on there all the time, something different. So follow me there.
Yeah, the Tunes website. You have a Tunes website?
Oh yeah, tunes.co, TUNESTOONS.co. It's where that's the website. It has just about the show, some of the episodes I've featured, articles I've written, things like that. So you can find everything there as well.
Awesome. Daniel Stoll, I know you're not much for social media, but can people contact you somehow?
Yeah, I'm super late to the Letterboxd game, but I actually did just recently start a Letterboxd where I'm reviewing all very brief reviews of all the movies I see this year, whether they came out this year or I'm watching them for the first time. So if you want to see what I think about movies, you can follow me at dstull, DSTULL. That's it at Letterboxd.
All right, fantastic. Everyone follow Daniel Stoll and like his reviews so he writes more of them. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Letterboxd, all at C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. Again, Twitter for random thoughts on film and TV, less and less these days. Letterboxd for movie reviews, and Instagram mostly. Honestly, at Instagram, I guess I post stories there, but it's mostly just like personal photos, not related to movies. But hey, check me out there. Hey, Laron, Joe, Harold, Daniel, thank you all so much for joining us on the special edition of the Cast Beyond the Wall and the Cinematic Schematic for the crossover episode. And for listeners who are already subscribed to both podcasts, well, thanks for downloading the show twice. We'll catch you again next time. For the Cinematic Schematic listeners, we'll be back with a review of John Wick Chapter 4. Woohoo. Until next time.